You are reading this sentence. You have a past, a childhood, a history, a sequence of experiences that brought you to this moment. You have memories, faces, places, conversations, the accumulated sensory record of decades of living. You have a body warm, breathing, solid, occupying a specific location in a specific room, on a specific planet, in a specific galaxy. Everything about your experience confirms that you are a real person in a real universe, the product of 14 billion years of cosmic evolution, 4 billion years of biological evolution, and several decades of personal development. Your existence makes sense. Your presence here is explained by a causal chain that stretches back to the Big Bang. But there is a problem so disturbing, so logically airtight, and so resistant to resolution that it has haunted the most brilliant physicists of the last century. A problem that emerges not from the exotic frontiers of quantum mechanics or string theory, but from the most basic, most well-established, most thoroughly confirmed branch of physics that exists: thermodynamics. The branch of physics that governs heat, energy, work, and the direction of time. The branch of physics that tells you why your coffee cools, why your room gets messy, why your body ages, and why the universe is dying. And the problem is this: thermodynamics says that you, with your memories, your body, your sense of continuous identity, are astronomically unlikely. So unlikely that a far more probable explanation for your existence is that you are not real, that your memories are false, that your past did not happen, that you are a momentary fluctuation, a brief, accidental arrangement of atoms that popped into existence a fraction of a second ago, complete with false memories of a past that never occurred, and that will dissolve back into chaos before you finish reading this paragraph. This is the Boltzmann brain paradox, and understanding it requires understanding the man who inadvertently created it and the law of physics that made it inevitable. Ludwig Boltzmann was born in Vienna in 1844, into a world that was still coming to terms with the Industrial Revolution's most profound scientific legacy: thermodynamics. The steam engine had transformed civilization, but the science of the steam engine had revealed something about the universe that was far more disturbing than any merely technological development. The science revealed that the universe is running down. The first law of thermodynamics, the conservation of energy, states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed from heat to work, from work to heat, from kinetic to potential, from potential to kinetic. The total amount of energy in the universe is constant. It was set at the Big Bang. It has not changed since, and it will not change ever. The second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy, states something far more consequential. In any closed system, entropy, the measure of disorder, of randomness, of the number of possible microscopic arrangements consistent with the system's macroscopic state, always increases. Always, without exception. In every process, in every interaction, in every transformation of energy from one form to another, the total entropy of the system increases. Order decays into disorder, structure dissolves into randomness. Hot things cool, cold things warm, differences equalize, gradients dissipate, and the universe, the ultimate closed system, moves inexorably, irreversibly, unstoppably toward the state of maximum entropy. Thermal equilibrium, the heat death, the condition in which every part of the universe is at the same temperature, every gradient has been equalized, every difference has been dissolved, and nothing can happen, because happening requires a difference. No stars burning, because burning requires a temperature gradient between the star and the surrounding space. No chemistry occurring, because chemistry requires energy differences between molecular configurations. No biology functioning, because biology requires the constant extraction of low entropy energy from the environment. No consciousness operating, because consciousness, as the neuroscience and the quantum physics have demonstrated throughout these investigations, requires the organized, far from equilibrium neural processing that depends on metabolic energy derived from the temperature gradients that the heat death has eliminated. The heat death is not a dramatic end, not an explosion, not a collapse, not a catastrophe. It is a whisper, the gradual, imperceptible, irreversible fading of every difference, every gradient, every structure into a featureless uniformity that will persist forever. The heat death is not the destruction of the universe. It is the completion of the universe, the final state toward which the second law has been driving every process, every reaction, every transformation since the beginning of time. The heat death is where time is going. And the heat death is eternal. Once reached, it persists forever, because there is no gradient left to drive any change, no difference left to power any process, no departure from equilibrium left to create any event. Nothing can happen, because happening requires a difference, a gradient, an imbalance, a departure from equilibrium, and there are no differences left. This is the arrow of time. This is why the past is different from the future. This is why your coffee cools but never spontaneously heats up. This is why your room gets messy but never spontaneously tidies itself. This is why you age but never spontaneously grow younger. The second law gives time a direction from order to disorder, from low entropy to high entropy, from the structured, differentiated, far from equilibrium state of the young universe to the featureless, homogeneous equilibrium state of the dead universe. Time flows because entropy increases. And entropy increases because there are vastly more ways for things to be disordered than for things to be ordered. Vastly more arrangements of atoms that look like a mess than arrangements that look like a room. Vastly more configurations of molecules that look like lukewarm water than configurations that look like a cup of hot coffee next to a glass of cold water. Consider a deck of cards. A new deck comes arranged by suit and rank, hearts ascending, then diamonds, then clubs, then spades. This is a low entropy state, a specific, recognizable, meaningful arrangement. Now shuffle the deck. Shuffle it once. Shuffle it again. Keep shuffling. The deck becomes disordered, the suits mix, the ranks scatter, the meaningful arrangement dissolves into randomness. The probability of returning to the original order through random shuffling is 1 in 8 times 10 to the 67th power, a number so large that if every person on Earth shuffled a deck once per second from the Big Bang until now, the probability of any one of them returning to the original order would still be essentially zero. The deck will never reshuffle itself into order, not because a force prevents it, because the number of disordered arrangements is so astronomically larger than the number of ordered arrangements that the ordered state is, for practical purposes, unreachable by random processes. This is the second law, not as a force but as a statistical inevitability, not as a commandment but as a mathematical truth. The universe does not forbid order. The universe simply does not visit order because order occupies an inconceivably tiny fraction of the space of possible arrangements, and the universe, exploring that space randomly, will almost never stumble onto it. Now scale this from a deck of 52 cards to a universe of approximately 10 to the 80th particles. The number of possible arrangements, the number of microstates, is a number so large that writing it would require more digits than there are atoms in the observable universe. And the fraction of those arrangements that produces anything recognizable: stars, galaxies, planets, chemistry, life. Consciousness is so infinitesimally small that the word improbable does not begin to convey the magnitude of the improbability. Boltzmann's genius was to explain why. In the 1870s, Boltzmann developed the statistical mechanical interpretation of entropy, the framework that connected the macroscopic law of thermodynamics. Entropy always increases to the microscopic behavior of atoms and molecules. Boltzmann showed that entropy is not a mysterious force. It is a statistical property, a measure of the number of microscopic arrangements, microstates, that are consistent with the macroscopic appearance macrostate of a system. A messy room has high entropy because there are billions of ways to arrange objects in a room that looks messy and only a few ways to arrange them so the room looks tidy. A cool coffee has high entropy because there are astronomically more ways for coffee molecules to be distributed at room temperature than at 90 degrees. The second law is not a force that pushes systems toward disorder. It is a statistical truth. Disorder is overwhelmingly more probable than order, and systems naturally evolve toward the most probable state because the most probable state has the most microstates, and the system is simply more likely to be found in one of the many disordered configurations than in one of the few ordered ones. Boltzmann formalized this insight in the equation that would become his epitaph: S equals K log W. S is the entropy. W is the number of microstates, the number of distinct microscopic arrangements that produce the same macroscopic appearance. And K is Boltzmann's constant, the bridge between the microscopic world of atoms and the macroscopic world of thermodynamics, the conversion factor that translates the language of probability into the language of physics. The equation is one of the most important in the history of science, ranking alongside Newton's F equals ma, Einstein's E equals mc squared, and Maxwell's equations as a foundational statement about the nature of reality. It says that entropy is not a mysterious substance. It is a number, a count of possibilities, a measure of the number of ways the microscopic world can arrange itself to produce the macroscopic world we observe. The equation also says something deeper, something that connects to every investigation we have conducted. Entropy is information. Or more precisely, entropy is a measure of missing information, the information you would need to specify the exact microscopic state of a system given only its macroscopic description. A high entropy state is a state about which you know little. There are many possible microstates, and you cannot determine which one the system is actually in. A low entropy state is a state about which you know much. There are few possible microstates, and the macroscopic description constrains the microscopic reality more tightly. Entropy and information are related by a minus sign. More entropy means less information. Less entropy means more information. And the second law, entropy always increases, is equivalent to saying that information always decreases. The universe is forgetting. The universe is losing the information that specified its initial low entropy state. And the heat death, the state of maximum entropy, is the state of maximum forgetting, the state in which all information about the universe's history has been erased by the relentless thermodynamic averaging that the second law demands. This connects directly to the aging investigation, where Sinclair described aging as information loss, the progressive erasure of the epigenetic information that tells cells how to function. The cell is forgetting. The body is forgetting. And the universe is doing the same thing on a cosmic scale, over cosmic time, with the same irreversible, inexorable, statistically inevitable logic. Aging is the second law operating in biology. The heat death is the second law operating in cosmology. And both are the same process, the universe running down, losing information, approaching the equilibrium from which it will never return. Boltzmann's insight was revolutionary, and it was brutally resisted by the scientific establishment of his time. Ernst Mach, the most influential philosopher of science in the German-speaking world, rejected the existence of atoms entirely, calling them a useless hypothesis, and dismissing Boltzmann's statistical mechanics as based on imaginary entities. Wilhelm Ostwald, the leading physical chemist of the era, sided with Mach, arguing that energy, not atoms, was the fundamental reality, and that Boltzmann's atomistic approach was philosophically confused. The attacks were sustained, public, and vicious. Boltzmann fought back in lectures, in papers, in public debates, but the opposition wore him down. The scientific community would prove Boltzmann right within years of his death. Jean Perrin's 1,908 experiments on Brownian motion provided the definitive evidence for atoms, and Einstein's 1905 paper on Brownian motion provided the theoretical framework that vindicated Boltzmann's statistical approach completely. Mach's anti-atomism was abandoned. Ostwald publicly recanted. Boltzmann's statistical mechanics became the foundation of modern physics. But Boltzmann did not live to see his vindication. He suffered from depression throughout his life, what his contemporaries called neurasthenia, and what modern psychiatry would likely diagnose as bipolar disorder. And in 1906, while on vacation with his family in Trieste, Boltzmann hanged himself. He was 62 years old. His tombstone bears no epitaph, no dates, no biographical inscription. It bears only an equation: S equals K log W, entropy equals Boltzmann's constant times the logarithm of the number of microstates. The equation that explained the arrow of time. The equation that would, decades after Boltzmann's death, generate a paradox that threatens to undermine the reality of everything, including you. The paradox begins with a question that seems innocent, but that leads to vertigo. If entropy always increases, if the universe moves inexorably from order to disorder, then why did the universe start in a state of low entropy? Why was the Big Bang so ordered? Why was the initial condition of the universe so spectacularly improbable, so far from equilibrium, so structured, so differentiated when the second law says that disorder is overwhelmingly more probable than order? This is the past hypothesis, the observation, first articulated clearly by Roger Penrose, that the initial state of the universe had extraordinarily low entropy. The Big Bang was not an explosion into chaos. It was an explosion into order, a state of extraordinary uniformity, extraordinary smoothness, extraordinary homogeneity, from which all the structure of the universe, galaxies, stars, planets, chemistry, biology, consciousness, has subsequently developed. The low entropy of the Big Bang is not explained by any known law of physics. It is a boundary condition, a brute fact about the initial state of the universe that the laws of physics take as given, but do not derive. Penrose calculated the probability of the Big Bang's initial state occurring by chance, by random fluctuation from a state of thermal equilibrium. The probability is 1 in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. This number is so inconceivably small that there is no physical analogy that can convey its magnitude. It is not merely unlikely. It is unlikely raised to a power that exceeds the number of particles in the observable universe, raised to a power that exceeds the number of particles in the observable universe. The initial state of the universe is, by any statistical measure, essentially impossible. To put this in perspective, if you wrote one digit of this number every second, it would take you longer than the age of the universe just to write the exponent. The number itself, the actual probability, is so far beyond human comprehension that Penrose himself described it as an extraordinary figure that could not have been the result of any ordinary physical process. The low entropy of the early universe is visible in the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the Big Bang, mapped with exquisite precision by the COBE, WMAP, and Planck satellites. The microwave background is uniform, the same temperature in every direction to an accuracy of 1 part in 100,000. This uniformity is a signature of extraordinarily low entropy, an extraordinarily improbable initial condition that set the stage for everything that followed. The tiny fluctuations in the microwave background, the 1 in 100,000 variations that the satellites detected, are the seeds from which all cosmic structure grew. Galaxies formed from the fluctuations. Stars formed within the galaxies. Planets formed around the stars. Chemistry emerged on the planets. Biology emerged from the chemistry. And consciousness emerged from the biology. Every step in this chain from the Big Bang to you. Reading this sentence was made possible by the absurdly improbable initial condition that Penrose quantified and that no known law of physics explains. And yet here we are, in this preposterously ordered universe, with your preposterously organized body, with your preposterously structured brain producing your preposterously coherent thoughts about the preposterously improbable fact of your own existence. The physicist Sean Carroll, one of the leading cosmologists working on the arrow of time and the entropy of the early universe, has described the past hypothesis as the most important unsolved problem in physics that most people have never heard of. The problem is not merely academic, it is existential, because the explanation you give for the low entropy of the early universe determines the explanation you give for your own existence. If the low entropy is a brute fact, an unexplained initial condition, then your existence is grounded in a mystery that physics cannot penetrate. If the low entropy is the product of a multiverse, one of infinitely many initial conditions, most of which produce featureless equilibrium, then your existence is an accident, a statistical anomaly, a lottery win of cosmic proportions. And if the low entropy is a fluctuation, a temporary, random departure from equilibrium in an otherwise dead universe, then your existence may be an illusion. And yet here we are, in a structured universe, with galaxies, stars, planets, and conscious beings. In a universe that started in a state of absurdly low entropy and that has been running down, increasing in entropy, decaying in order, approaching equilibrium ever since. The second law explains the running down. Nothing explains the winding up. Nothing explains why the universe started in a state so improbable that its occurrence by chance is, for all practical purposes, impossible. Boltzmann himself proposed a solution, and the solution, ironically, is the source of the paradox that bears his name. Boltzmann suggested that the universe we observe is not the whole universe. The whole universe, Boltzmann proposed, is in a state of thermal equilibrium, a vast, featureless, maximum entropy void in which nothing happens because nothing can happen. But thermal equilibrium is not perfectly static. Statistical mechanics guarantees that fluctuations will occur, random, temporary departures from equilibrium in which, by pure chance, atoms briefly arrange themselves into a configuration of lower entropy. A cup of coffee spontaneously heats up. A room spontaneously tidies itself. A pocket of the void spontaneously organizes itself into a galaxy, a star, a planet, a biosphere, a brain. These fluctuations are real. They are predicted by statistical mechanics. They are not forbidden by any law of physics. They are merely improbable, overwhelmingly, staggeringly, cosmically improbable. But in an infinite universe, in infinite time, even the overwhelmingly improbable becomes inevitable. Given enough time, every fluctuation will occur, every temporary arrangement, every transient order, every brief departure from equilibrium. And we, with our structured universe, our low-entropy Big Bang, our galaxies and stars and planets and consciousness, might be one such fluctuation. A bubble of order in an ocean of chaos, a soap bubble in a bathtub of noise, a brief, shimmering, impossibly beautiful arrangement of matter that will dissolve back into the featureless equilibrium from which it spontaneously emerged. The fluctuation hypothesis has a certain grim elegance. It does not require a creator. It does not require fine-tuning. It does not require any special initial condition. It requires only time, an infinite amount of it, and the statistical certainty that in infinite time every possible fluctuation will occur. The universe needs no designer. It needs only patience. And the patience of infinity is absolute. It waits without waiting, endures without enduring, and eventually produces, through pure chance, every configuration that is physically possible, including configurations complex enough to contain galaxies, stars, planets, and minds that contemplate their own existence. The concept connects to an intuition that the contemplative traditions have expressed since the earliest recorded human thought, the sense that the visible world is temporary, that the apparent solidity of existence conceals a deeper impermanence, that the structures we inhabit, physical, biological, psychological, are bubbles on the surface of an ocean whose depths are unknowable and whose nature is fundamentally different from the bubbles it produces. The Hindu concept of Maya, the veil of illusion that conceals the true nature of reality, is the Boltzmann fluctuation described in theological language. The Buddhist concept of anicca, the impermanence of all conditioned phenomena, is the second law of thermodynamics described in contemplative language. The structures arise, the structures persist, the structures dissolve. The Taoist tradition describes this with characteristic elegance. The 10,000 things arise and fall without cease. Tao Te Ching, Chapter 2. The 10,000 things, the multiplicity of forms, the diversity of structures, the variety of beings, are fluctuations. They arise from the Tao, the featureless, formless, nameless ground of reality, and they return to the Tao. The arising is spontaneous, the return is inevitable, and the Tao itself, the equilibrium, the ground, the nameless source is unchanged by the arising and unchanged by the return. The Kabbalistic tradition describes creation as tzimtzum, the divine contraction, the withdrawal of the infinite Ein Sof, the without end, to create a space in which finite structures can exist. The fluctuation is the tzimtzum, the brief, temporary, structured departure from the infinite fullness of the divine ground. And the return to equilibrium is the tikkun, the restoration, the healing, the return of the finite to the infinite from which it emerged. The universe, in the Kabbalistic framework, is a fluctuation in the divine, a momentary departure from the infinite, structured just enough and just long enough to accomplish the purpose for which it was created, and destined to return to the Ein Sof when the purpose is fulfilled. The structures arise, the structures persist, the structures dissolve, and what remains is the equilibrium, the featureless, timeless, changeless ground from which the structures emerged and to which they return. A temporary, accidental, statistically inevitable departure from the equilibrium that is the universe's true and permanent state. Boltzmann's fluctuation hypothesis solved one problem. It explained why the universe appears to be in a low entropy state without requiring an explanation for the initial conditions. The low entropy is not initial. It is a fluctuation, a temporary dip in the entropy of a much larger system that is, on average, at equilibrium. The universe did not start in a state of low entropy. It fluctuated into a state of low entropy briefly, temporarily. improbably but inevitably, and it is now fluctuating back toward equilibrium. But the solution created a problem that is far worse than the problem it solved. And the problem connects directly to the question of your identity, your memory, your past, and the reality of everything you have ever experienced. Because if you are a fluctuation, if the ordered universe you observe is a temporary departure from equilibrium, then Boltzmann's own statistical logic demands that the fluctuation should be as small as possible. The probability of a fluctuation decreases exponentially with the size of the entropy decrease. A small fluctuation is exponentially more probable than a large one. A fluctuation that produces a single brain with memories, sensory impressions, and the illusion of an entire universe is exponentially more probable than a fluctuation that produces an actual entire universe. And the traditions, as we will explore, have been describing exactly this possibility for millennia. The possibility that the universe is not what it appears, that the past is not what you remember. That reality is a construction not of neurons, not of culture, not of language, but of the deepest statistical logic of the physical world, which says that the simplest explanation for your existence is not 14 billion years of cosmic evolution, but a single, momentary, spontaneous fluctuation in the void, a Boltzmann brain, a naked brain, or more precisely, a naked set of mental states that spontaneously fluctuates into existence from the thermal equilibrium of the void, persists for a single moment of conscious experience, and dissolves back into the void before the experience is complete. The brain does not need a body, it does not need a planet, it does not need a galaxy, it does not need a universe. It needs only the minimum physical structure required to produce a single moment of conscious experience, and the statistical logic of thermodynamics guarantees that this minimal structure will fluctuate into existence infinitely, more often than the 14 billion year cosmic structure that you believe produced you. The mathematics is merciless. For every fluctuation that produces an entire universe with its galaxies and stars and planets and 4 billion year evolutionary history, there are an unimaginably larger number of fluctuations that produce just a brain with memories of a universe that never existed, a brain with the sensation of reading a sentence that was never written, a brain with the conviction of being a person who was never born. If you are a fluctuation, and the thermodynamics says you might be, then you are almost certainly not the product of a real universe. You are almost certainly a Boltzmann brain. And your memories, all of them, every last one, are false. The next part of this investigation will confront this possibility directly, and the confrontation will take us to the edge of what physics can say about the nature of reality, the meaning of memory, and the question of whether you are real. The first part of this investigation established the thermodynamic foundation. The universe is running down, entropy increases, order decays into disorder, and the extraordinary low entropy of the Big Bang, the structured, differentiated, far from equilibrium initial state from which all cosmic evolution has proceeded, is not explained by any known law of physics. Boltzmann proposed that our ordered universe is a fluctuation, a temporary, random, statistically inevitable departure from the thermal equilibrium of a much larger system. The proposal solved the problem of the initial conditions, but it created a problem that is far worse, a problem that strikes at the foundation of your identity, your memory, and the reality of everything you have ever experienced. The problem is this: if our universe is a fluctuation from equilibrium, then the fluctuation should be as small as possible. This is not a philosophical preference. It is a mathematical necessity, a direct consequence of Boltzmann's own statistical mechanics. The probability of a fluctuation decreases exponentially with the magnitude of the entropy decrease. A fluctuation that decreases entropy by 1 unit is exponentially more probable than a fluctuation that decreases entropy by 2 units. A fluctuation that produces a single galaxy is exponentially more probable than a fluctuation that produces a billion galaxies. A fluctuation that produces a single planet is exponentially more probable than a fluctuation that produces a single galaxy. A fluctuation that produces a single organism is exponentially more probable than a fluctuation that produces a single planet. And a fluctuation that produces a single brain, a minimal physical system capable of a single moment of conscious experience, is exponentially more probable than a fluctuation that produces a single organism. The logic is relentless. If you are a fluctuation, you are almost certainly the smallest possible fluctuation consistent with your current experience. You are almost certainly not a real person with a real past in a real universe. You are almost certainly a Boltzmann brain, a minimal arrangement of matter that has spontaneously fluctuated into existence from the thermal void, equipped with false memories of a past that never occurred, false sensory impressions of a universe that does not exist, and false beliefs about a history that never happened. Your memories of childhood are false. Your memories of yesterday are false. Your sense of sitting in a room reading this text is false, or rather, the room is false, the text is false, the history that produced the text is false. Your education is fabricated. The textbooks you remember reading were never written. The teachers you remember listening to never taught. The knowledge you believe you acquired through years of study was implanted in your brain by the random arrangement of atoms that the fluctuation produced. Your relationships are fabricated, the people you love, the conversations you remember, the shared history that constitutes the bond between you and the people closest to you. None of it happened. The people may not even exist. The only thing that is real is this moment of experience, this single, flickering, instantaneous flash of consciousness that will dissolve back into the void before the next thought can form. This is not science fiction. This is not a thought experiment designed to provoke philosophical amusement. This is a logical consequence of the most well-established branch of physics in existence, thermodynamics combined with the most basic principles of probability theory. If the universe is a fluctuation, then Boltzmann brains outnumber real brains by a ratio that is not merely large but infinite. For every fluctuation that produces a genuine 14 billion-year-old universe with 4 billion years of biological evolution and several decades of your personal history, there are an incomprehensibly larger number of fluctuations that produce just you, just this moment, just this experience, just this brain, with all its apparent history fabricated by the random arrangement of atoms that the fluctuation produced. The philosopher Nick Bostrom, whose simulation argument we explored in previous investigations, has noted the structural similarity between the Boltzmann brain problem and the simulation hypothesis. Both arguments conclude that you are probably not what you think you are. The simulation argument says you are probably a simulated consciousness rather than a biological one. The Boltzmann brain argument says you are probably a momentary fluctuation rather than a historically grounded one. And both arguments reach their conclusions not through speculation but through probability, through the observation that the alternatives to your assumed reality are vastly more numerous than the reality you assume, and that in the absence of evidence distinguishing between the possibilities, probability favors the more numerous alternative. But the Boltzmann brain argument is, in one respect, more disturbing than the simulation argument. The simulation at least preserves the coherence of your experience in a simulation. Your memories may be simulated, but they are consistent. Your past may be computed, but it is sequential. Your identity may be virtual, but it is continuous. The Boltzmann brain preserves nothing. The Boltzmann brain is a single flash, a momentary, isolated, contextless burst of experience, with no before and no after, no cause and no consequence, no history and no future. The simulation is a story, a potentially meaningful story being told by a storyteller for a reason. The Boltzmann brain is a hiccup, a random, meaningless, purposeless blip in the void. The cosmological context makes the problem worse, not better. Modern cosmology, based on the observations of the accelerating expansion of the universe, the measurements of the cosmic microwave background, and the theoretical framework of inflationary cosmology, predicts a future for the universe that is dominated by the very conditions that produce Boltzmann brains. The universe is not merely expanding, it is accelerating, driven by dark energy, the mysterious repulsive force that constitutes approximately 68% of the universe's total energy content, and that is pushing the galaxies apart at an ever-increasing rate. The acceleration was discovered in 1998 by two independent teams, the Supernova Cosmology Project led by Saul Perlmutter and the High-Z Supernova Search Team led by Brian Schmidt and Adam Rees, a discovery so unexpected and so important that it earned the 2011 Nobel Prize in Physics. The acceleration means that the universe will not collapse. It will not recycle. It will not bounce back from its expansion into a new Big Bang. Instead, it will expand forever, and as it expands, it will cool. The stars will exhaust their nuclear fuel. The last stars will burn out in approximately 100 trillion years, a number that sounds large, but that is, on the timescale of the universe's ultimate future, the blink of an eye. After the stars die, the galaxies go dark. The beautiful spiral arms, the glowing nebulae, the brilliant clusters, all extinguished. The universe that produced the Hubble Deep Field, the most beautiful photograph ever taken, showing thousands of galaxies in a patch of sky smaller than a grain of sand, held at arm's length, will be a universe of darkness, of cold, of invisible remnants, orbiting invisible remnants in a void so vast and so empty that the distance between any two objects will exceed the observable universe of today. After the stars die, the universe enters the degenerate era, a period in which the only remaining energy sources are the gravitational energy of stellar remnants, white dwarfs, neutron stars, black holes, and the slow decay of protons, if protons are unstable, which some grand unified theories predict. The degenerate era lasts for an almost inconceivable period on the order of 10 to the 37th years, or a trillion years. After the degenerate era comes the black hole era, a period in which the only remaining objects are black holes, slowly evaporating through Hawking radiation. The last black holes, the supermassive black holes at the centers of former galaxies, will evaporate in approximately 10 to the 100th years. This is a number so large that writing it out, a 1 followed by 100 zeros, already exceeds the capacity of human intuition. After the black holes evaporate, the universe enters the dark era, an infinite expanse of empty space, cooling asymptotically toward absolute zero, containing nothing but a thin bath of photons and leptons at a temperature indistinguishable from zero. The physicist Fred Adams, author of The 5 Ages of the Universe, has mapped this trajectory in detail, dividing the universe's future into 5 cosmological eras based on the dominant physical processes in each. The primordial era, the first 3 minutes, the stelliferous era, the current age of stars, the the degenerate era, white dwarfs and neutron stars, the black hole era, dominated by evaporating black holes, and the dark era, the eternal aftermath. We are currently in the stelliferous era, the brief, cosmologically insignificant period during which stars burn, planets orbit, and biology is possible. This era will end, and the eras that follow, each one longer than the last by factors of millions and billions, will be progressively emptier, progressively colder, progressively more hostile to anything resembling structure, order, or life. This is the heat death. This is where the second law has been pointing since the beginning. This is the equilibrium state that the universe has been approaching for 14 billion years, and that it will reach essentially after the last black hole evaporates. And the heat death is not temporary. It is permanent. It is the universe's final state, the state of maximum entropy, the state from which no macroscopic change can occur, the state that will persist, unchanging, for the remainder of eternity. But unchanging is not quite right. Statistical mechanics guarantees that fluctuations will occur even in the heat death, even in the equilibrium state, even in the absolute void. And this is where the Boltzmann brain problem becomes not a theoretical curiosity, but a cosmological crisis. In the dark era, in the infinite emptiness that follows the heat death, time is infinite, and in infinite time, every fluctuation that is not forbidden by conservation laws will occur. The probability of a given fluctuation in any particular moment is astronomically small, but the time available is astronomically large, and the product of a small probability and a large time is a certainty. Boltzmann brains will fluctuate into existence. They will flash into momentary awareness, equipped with false memories, false sensory impressions, false beliefs about a universe that once existed and that they falsely remember, and they will dissolve back into the void, and they will do this forever. An infinite number of Boltzmann brains, across an infinite expanse of time, each one experiencing a single, isolated, contextless moment of consciousness, each one believing itself to be a real person in a real universe, each one wrong. The problem for cosmology is not that Boltzmann brains exist in the far future. The problem is that Boltzmann brains are the typical observers in the universe's history. If you count all the moments of conscious experience that will ever occur in the universe's entire history, from the Big Bang, through the stellar era, through the degenerate era, through the black hole era, through the infinite, dark era, the overwhelming majority of those moments will be Boltzmann brain moments, not real observer moments. Real observers, biological beings produced by stellar nucleosynthesis, planetary formation, and biological evolution, exist only during the stellar era, a period that is cosmologically brief. Boltzmann brains exist during the dark era, a period that is cosmologically infinite. The ratio of Boltzmann brain moments to real observer moments is infinite to finite, which means that if you are a randomly selected moment of conscious experience in the universe's history, you are almost certainly a Boltzmann brain. This is the measure problem, one of the deepest unsolved problems in cosmology. How do you compare probabilities in an infinite universe? How do you determine whether you are a typical observer or an atypical one when the number of observers is infinite? This is sometimes called the youngness paradox or the Boltzmann brain catastrophe, the conclusion that any cosmological theory with an infinite future populated by Boltzmann brain fluctuations predicts that you are almost certainly not a product of biological evolution. The prediction is so counterintuitive, so destructive to the coherence of physics, and so resistant to resolution that some cosmologists have called it the most serious challenge to the standard cosmological model since its inception. The measure problem does not have a universally accepted solution, and different solutions produce radically different conclusions about whether Boltzmann brains are a genuine threat to the coherence of physics. Sean Carroll has argued that the Boltzmann brain problem is a reductio ad absurdum, a proof by contradiction that any cosmological model that predicts the dominance of Boltzmann brains is wrong. If a model predicts that you are almost certainly a Boltzmann brain and you can verify through the coherence and consistency of your experience that you are probably not a Boltzmann brain, then the model is empirically refuted. The prediction you are a Boltzmann brain is falsified by the evidence. Your experience is coherent and consistent in ways that a Boltzmann brain's experience should not be. Therefore, any model that predicts Boltzmann brain dominance is ruled out, and the correct model of the universe must be one that avoids the Boltzmann brain problem, one in which real observers outnumber Boltzmann brains, one in which the universe's future does not produce an infinite number of random fluctuations. But Carroll's argument has a disturbing weakness. It assumes that you can verify that you are not a Boltzmann brain. But can you? Your experience seems coherent, your memories seem consistent, your sensory impressions seem to confirm a real, structured, historically grounded universe. But a Boltzmann brain by definition would have exactly the same experience. A Boltzmann brain's false memories would seem coherent. Its false sensory impressions would seem consistent. Its false beliefs about the universe would seem confirmed by its false perceptions of the universe. Raphael Bousso, a theoretical physicist at UC Berkeley, has proposed that the correct measure for counting observers in an infinite universe should be based on the causal diamond, the region of space-time that a single observer can causally access during their lifetime. In Bousso's framework, the infinite future is not counted because it lies outside any observer's causal diamond, and the Boltzmann brain problem is avoided because the infinite proliferation of future fluctuations is excluded from the probability calculation. But the solution is controversial. Other cosmologists argue that the causal diamond measure is ad hoc, designed to avoid the Boltzmann brain problem rather than derived from first principles. Alan Guth, the father of inflationary cosmology, has argued that the measure problem is a genuine crisis for the inflationary paradigm, because many versions of eternal inflation predict exactly the kind of infinite future that generates Boltzmann brain dominance. If inflation is eternal, if new universes are constantly being created within the inflating space-time, then the total number of Boltzmann brains across all the universes is infinite, and the Boltzmann brain problem returns with full force. Lisa Dyson, Matthew Kleben, and Leonard Susskind, in a 2002 paper provocatively titled "Disturbing Implications of a Cosmological Constant," argued that the presence of dark energy, the cosmological constant, guarantees the Boltzmann brain problem. Dark energy drives the universe toward a de Sitter vacuum, a state of eternal expansion with a finite temperature, the de Sitter temperature, approximately 10 to the minus 30 Kelvin. And a vacuum at finite temperature is a vacuum that fluctuates, producing, over the infinite future, an infinite number of Boltzmann brains. The dark energy that accelerates the expansion of the universe may be the engine that produces the Boltzmann brain catastrophe. The Boltzmann brain cannot distinguish itself from a real observer because the distinguishing would require access to information about the brain's causal history, and the Boltzmann brain's causal history is precisely the thing that has been fabricated. This is the epistemological abyss at the heart of the Boltzmann brain problem. Every piece of evidence you could cite to prove that you are not a Boltzmann brain, the consistency of your memories, the coherence of your sensory experience, the predictive success of your scientific theories, The testimony of other people is precisely the kind of evidence that a Boltzmann brain would also possess. Your memories are consistent, but a Boltzmann brain's false memories would also be consistent, because the fluctuation that produced them was complex enough to produce consistency. Your scientific theories make successful predictions, but a Boltzmann brain's experience of successful predictions would also be consistent, because the Boltzmann brain's experience of testing a prediction and observing its success is itself part of the momentary experience that the fluctuation produced. You cannot step outside your experience to check whether your experience is veridical, because the stepping outside would itself be an experience, and the question of whether that experience is veridical faces the same infinite regress. The philosopher Hilary Putnam raised a structurally similar problem with his brain in a vat thought experiment, the scenario in which your brain is floating in a vat of nutrients connected to a computer that generates all of your sensory experiences. Putnam argued that you cannot be a brain in a vat because the very concepts you would use to formulate the hypothesis, brain, vat, nutrients, computer, would have different meanings if you were a brain in a vat than if you were not. But the Boltzmann brain problem is worse than the brain in a vat, because the brain in the vat at least has a causal history. Someone put the brain in the vat, someone built the computer, someone designed the simulation, while the Boltzmann brain has no causal history at all. The Boltzmann brain is uncaused, spontaneous, random, purposeless, the product of nothing but the statistical necessity that fluctuations occur in equilibrium systems. The most unsettling response to the Boltzmann brain problem comes from the physicist Kip Thorne, who has noted that the problem is self-undermining in a peculiar way. If you are a Boltzmann brain, then the physics that led you to the Boltzmann brain conclusion is false, because the physics is part of your false memories, derived from false observations of a false universe. The conclusion that you might be a Boltzmann brain depends on the validity of thermodynamics, but if you are a Boltzmann brain, thermodynamics is not valid. It is a false memory of a science that was never actually developed through actual observations of an actual universe. The Boltzmann brain hypothesis uses the laws of physics to argue that the laws of physics might be false. The argument is logically coherent but epistemically self-destructive, like a letter that begins, "Everything in this letter is a lie." The quantum dimension of the Boltzmann brain problem introduces yet another layer of complexity and connects the paradox to the frameworks we have assembled across our investigations. In quantum field theory, the vacuum is not empty. It is a seething foam of quantum fluctuations, virtual particles appearing and disappearing, energy fluctuating around the 0-point value, the fields oscillating even in the absence of all matter and radiation. These quantum fluctuations are real. They produce measurable effects. The Casimir effect, predicted by Hendrik Casimir in 1948 and measured with increasing precision, since demonstrates that two uncharged metallic plates placed very close together in a vacuum experience a measurable attractive force. The force exists because the quantum vacuum between the plates has fewer possible fluctuation modes than the quantum vacuum outside the plates. The plates exclude fluctuations with wavelengths larger than the gap between them, creating a pressure difference that pushes the plates together. The force is tiny, but it is real. It is measurable, and it is proof that the quantum vacuum is not empty, but is filled with fluctuating energy that can produce physical effects. These quantum fluctuations are real. They produce measurable effects, the Casimir effect, the Lamb shift, the anomalous magnetic moment of the electron, and are among the most precisely confirmed predictions in the history of physics. Quantum fluctuations can, in principle, produce macroscopic objects, The probability is astronomically small. The probability of a quantum fluctuation producing a brane is so low that the number of zeros after the decimal point would itself be a number larger than the number of atoms in the observable universe. But quantum mechanics does not assign zero probability to the event. The probability is finite, incredibly, impossibly, unimaginably small, but finite. And in the infinite time of the dark era, a finite probability multiplied by infinite time yields certainty. Quantum Boltzmann branes will fluctuate into existence from the vacuum, not merely as thermal fluctuations of pre-existing matter, but as quantum fluctuations of the vacuum itself, materializing from nothing, experiencing a moment of consciousness, and dissolving back into nothing. The quantum Boltzmann brane is the ultimate expression of the information-first principle we established in the information investigation. The quantum vacuum contains information. The quantum fluctuation organizes the information into a momentary pattern, a pattern complex enough to produce a single moment of conscious experience. The pattern is not constructed by a builder. It is not designed by a designer. It is not computed by a simulator. It is fluctuated spontaneously, randomly, purposelessly, from the infinite informational content of the vacuum into a brief, fragile, ephemeral arrangement that experiences itself as real before dissolving back into the informational ground from which it emerged. This connects to the ORT-core framework we explored in the creativity investigation. If consciousness arises from quantum processes in microtubules, if the objective reduction event is the moment of conscious experience, then a Boltzmann brane does not need a full biological brain. It needs only the minimum quantum system capable of supporting an objective reduction event, a system that could be far smaller, far simpler, and far more probable than a complete brane. The Boltzmann brane might not be a brane at all. It might be a momentary quantum configuration, a brief, organized, coherent arrangement of quantum fields that supports a single OR event, a single moment of consciousness, before decoherence destroys the coherence and the moment ends. This possibility that consciousness does not require a full brane, but only a minimal quantum system, connects to the filter theory in a surprising way. If the brain is a filter that constrains consciousness rather than producing it, if consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality rather than a product of biological complexity, then the Boltzmann brane might not need to produce consciousness at all. It might only need to provide a momentary filter, a brief, transient, quantum mechanical constraint on the pre-existing consciousness that pervades the vacuum. The fluctuation does not create consciousness. It shapes consciousness momentarily, briefly, for a single flash into the form of a specific experience, a specific perspective, a specific I. And then the fluctuation dissolves, the filter dissolves, and the consciousness returns to its unfiltered, non-local, unbounded state. In this framework, the Boltzmann brane paradox is not a paradox about the creation of consciousness from nothing. It is a paradox about the momentary filtration of consciousness that is always everywhere, the brief, spontaneous, purposeless narrowing of universal awareness into a specific, individual, apparently personal experience. The vacuum does not need to create your mind. The vacuum is mind, or at least, the vacuum is the informational ground from which mind is filtered. And the fluctuation is the filter, the momentary, physical, thermodynamically improbable arrangement that constrains the universal mind into the specific experience of being you, right now, reading this sentence, believing yourself to be real. The traditions, as we will explore in the next part of this investigation, have been describing this possibility for millennia. The Buddhist concept of kshana, the momentary, instantaneous, point-like moment of consciousness that arises and passes away in the briefest possible interval, is the contemplative description of what the Boltzmann brain paradox describes in physical terms. The Hindu concept of Brahma's dream, the vision of the universe as a dream in the mind of God, arising spontaneously, persisting briefly, dissolving inevitably, is the theological description of the fluctuation hypothesis, and the question that every tradition asks: is this real? Is this permanent? Is this what it appears to be? Is the question that the Boltzmann brain paradox asks with the full weight of thermodynamic law behind it. Is this real? Is your experience right now, in this moment, the product of 14 billion years of cosmic evolution? Or is it a spontaneous fluctuation, a quantum hiccup in the void, a momentary arrangement of information that has organized itself by pure chance into the convincing, coherent, emotionally vivid illusion of a person reading a sentence in a universe that never existed? The traditions do not flinch from this question. They walk straight into it with practices, with frameworks, with the accumulated wisdom of millennia of contemplative investigation, and their response, as we will see, is not despair. It is liberation, because the traditions recognize something that the physics is only now articulating. The question, is this real, is not a problem to be solved. It is a doorway to be entered. The discovery that reality may be a fluctuation, that the universe may be a bubble, that the self may be a momentary pattern in the void, is not a reason for nihilism. It is a reason for awakening. If everything you believed was solid is actually fluid, if everything you believed was permanent is actually momentary, if everything you believed was self-evident is actually constructed, then the appropriate response is not grief at the loss of the solid, the permanent, the self-evident. The appropriate response is curiosity about what remains when the solidity, the permanence, and the self-evidence are recognized as constructions. What is left when the fluctuation is recognized as a fluctuation? What is real when the real is revealed as contingent? The traditions have been living in this question for millennia. They have technologies for exploring it. They have maps of the territory it reveals. And they have a consistent, convergent, structurally precise answer to the question that the Boltzmann brain paradox asks, with the full weight of thermodynamic law: what are you, really? When you cannot trust your memories, your perceptions, or your sense of being a continuous person in a continuous world. The traditions did not have thermodynamics. They did not have statistical mechanics. They did not have the mathematics of entropy, the physics of fluctuations, or the cosmological models of the universe's far future. But they had something that the physicists did not: millennia of direct investigation into the nature of experience itself. And the investigation led them independently, across every continent, across every century, to a conclusion that is structurally identical to the Boltzmann brain paradox. The reality you perceive may not be what it appears. Your memories may not be reliable. Your sense of continuous identity may be a construction. And the appropriate response to this discovery is not despair, but awakening the recognition that the impermanence of the construction does not diminish the reality of the awareness that perceives the construction. Hinduism confronts the Boltzmann brain paradox through the concept of Maya, the cosmic illusion that veils the true nature of reality. Maya is not a lie. It is not a deliberate deception. It is the natural and inevitable consequence of consciousness projecting itself into form, the process by which the formless Brahman appears as the formed universe, the process by which the one appears as the many, the process by which the permanent appears as the impermanent. Maya is the universe's fluctuation, the temporary, structured, apparently real projection from the formless ground of reality, convincing in its detail, compelling in its coherence, and ultimately illusory in its claim to permanent, independent, self-sustaining existence. The Yoga Vasistha, one of the most extraordinary texts in world literature, a 6,000-verse philosophical epic embedded within the Ramayana, describes reality in terms that read like a poetic rendering of the Boltzmann brain scenario. Vasistha tells the Prince Rama, "This world appearance is a confusion, even as the blueness of the sky is an illusion. I think it is better not to let the mind dwell on it, but to rest in the self. The world is compared to a dream within a dream. Within a dream, layers of illusion nested within illusion, each layer appearing real from within, but revealed as empty from without." Vasistha describes entire universes arising and dissolving within the space of a single thought. Universes with complete histories, complete populations, complete physical laws, all generated spontaneously by the creative power of consciousness, and all dissolving when the thought that sustained them passes. In one of the text's most celebrated passages, Vasistha describes a sage named Lila who discovers, through yogic power, that her deceased husband is living an entirely different life in an entirely different universe, a universe that exists within the space of consciousness, that has its own complete history spanning millions of years, and that is, from the perspective of Lila's original universe, a mere moment. Within that husband's universe, another being discovers another universe within their consciousness, with another complete history, and so on an infinite regression of universes nested within universes, each one appearing eternal from within and momentary from without, each one sustained by the consciousness that perceives it, each one as real as the one that contains it, and as illusory as the one it contains. The Yoga Vasistha does not treat these nested universes as hypothetical. It treats them as the actual structure of reality, a fractal of consciousness in which every mind contains a universe, and every universe contains minds that contain universes, all of them arising from and dissolving into the formless awareness that is the only permanent reality. The text's conclusion is not that reality is worthless because it is illusory. Its conclusion is that reality is sacred because it is miraculous that the arising of a structured, coherent, emotionally vivid universe from the formless ground of consciousness is the most extraordinary event imaginable, and that it is happening right now, in every mind, in every moment, with a creative power that no human technology can match. The concept of Brahma's dream is the Hindu expression of the fluctuation hypothesis at the cosmic scale. Brahma, the creator deity, dreams the universe into existence. The universe is Brahma's dream, a mental projection sustained by the dreamer's creative power, real as long as the dream lasts, dissolving when the dreamer awakens. The cycle of creation and dissolution, Srishti and Pralaya, repeats endlessly. Brahma dreams, the universe appears. Brahma awakens, the universe dissolves. Brahma sleeps, the void persists. Brahma dreams again, a new universe appears. Each universe lasts for one kalpa, one day of Brahma, approximately 4.32 billion years, remarkably close to the current scientific estimate of the age of the Earth. And between the dreams during Brahma's nights, nothing exists. The void prevails. The equilibrium endures. Until the next fluctuation, the next dream, the next spontaneous arising of a structured universe from the formless ground. The parallel to the Boltzmann fluctuation hypothesis is structural. The void between Brahma's dreams is the thermal equilibrium. The dream is the fluctuation. The universe is the temporary, structured, far from equilibrium departure that arises spontaneously and dissolves inevitably. And the dreamer Brahma, the creative consciousness that generates the fluctuation, is the element that the physics cannot identify, but that the tradition insists is present. The awareness in which the fluctuation occurs, the consciousness that experiences the universe without being identical to the universe, the ground that persists through the cycles of arising and dissolution without being affected by them. Buddhism approaches the Boltzmann brain paradox through a concept that is, in some ways, more radical than the Hindu Maya, because Buddhism does not posit a dreamer behind the dream. In Buddhism, there is no Brahma sustaining the universe through creative consciousness. There is no Atman persisting through the changes. There is only the process, the continuous, causally connected, momentary arising and passing of mental and physical events that constitutes experience, and that the Buddhist tradition analyzes with a precision that anticipates the Boltzmann brain scenario with extraordinary accuracy. The concept of kshana. The momentary instant is the Buddhist atom of time. A kshana is the briefest possible duration of experience, the quantum of consciousness, the minimum temporal unit in which a mental event can arise, persist, and pass away. The Abhidharma, the Buddhist compendium of psychological and philosophical analysis, describes consciousness as a series of kshanas, each one arising in dependence on the previous one, each one lasting for an inconceivably brief duration, each one passing away and giving rise to the next. There is no continuous consciousness. There is no persistent self. There is only the stream, the rapid succession of momentary mental events that creates the illusion of continuity through the same mechanism that rapid succession of film frames creates the illusion of motion. The Boltzmann brain is, in Buddhist terms, a single kshana, a single momentary instant of experience that arises from the void, the equilibrium, persists for one moment, the fluctuation's duration, and passes away, the return to equilibrium. The Buddhist analysis does not treat this as a paradox. It treats it as the nature of reality, the fundamental impermanence that characterizes all conditioned phenomena, the ceaseless arising and passing that the Vipassana meditator observes directly in their own experience. The Boltzmann brain paradox says, you might be a single moment of experience with no real past and no real future. Buddhism says, you are a single moment of experience with no real past and no real future. This is not a catastrophe. This is the truth. And the truth, directly perceived through the sustained observation of the mind's own activity, is liberating rather than terrifying, because the recognition that each moment is complete in itself, that each kshana is an entire universe arising and dissolving, frees the mind from its desperate clinging to continuity, permanence, and the illusory self that claims ownership of the stream. The Yogacara school, the mind-only school of Buddhist philosophy, pushes this analysis to its most radical conclusion. Vasubandhu, the 4th century philosopher who systematized Yogacara, argued that the external world does not exist independently of consciousness. What appears as an external world with its objects, its people, its physical laws, is a projection of consciousness, a construction of the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness, a mental fabrication that consciousness takes to be real in the same way that a dreamer takes the dream to be real. The external world is not out there. It is in here, generated by the mind's own activity, sustained by the mind's own attention, and dissolved when the mind's own attention withdraws. This is the Boltzmann brain scenario described in 5th century Buddhist philosophy. The universe is not an external reality that your brain perceives. It is an internal construction that your consciousness generates, complete with false objects, false people, false physical laws, and a false history that your consciousness takes to be real because it has no access to any reality beyond its own constructions. The Yogacara philosopher and the cosmologist arrive at the same conclusion through different methods. The universe you experience may be a construction of your own mind, sustained by the same consciousness that it appears to contain, and dissolving when the consciousness that sustains it ceases. The Yogacara tradition's concept of the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness, provides the mechanism for this construction. The alaya vijnana is a deep subconscious level of consciousness that stores the seeds beer of all past experiences, all accumulated tendencies, all karmic traces. These seeds ripen under appropriate conditions and produce the projections that consciousness takes to be an external world. The world of objects, people, and physical laws is not perceived by consciousness. It is projected by consciousness, projected from the storehouse of accumulated seeds, shaped by the karmic tendencies that the seeds contain, and experienced as external and independent, because the projection mechanism is invisible to the consciousness that it serves. The connection to the Boltzmann brain scenario is precise. The Boltzmann brain's memories, its false past, its fabricated history, its illusory sense of having been produced by a causal chain stretching back to the Big Bang, correspond to the seeds in the alaya vijnana. The seeds are not memories of real events. They are tendencies, informational patterns that shape the projections of consciousness without necessarily corresponding to any external reality. The alaya vijnana generates a coherent, internally consistent world from its stored seeds, just as a Boltzmann brain generates a coherent, internally consistent experience from its random but structured arrangement of atoms. In both cases, the coherence is real, the experience is genuine, the suffering is genuine, the beauty is genuine. But the external referent, the world that the experience claims to be about, may not exist independently of the consciousness that projects it. Nagarjuna, the 2nd century philosopher, whose Madhyamaka, middle way, school is one of the 2 pillars of Mahayana, Buddhist philosophy, took a different approach. Nagarjuna did not deny the external world. He denied the independent, self-sustaining existence of anything, including consciousness, including the alaya vijnana, including the void itself. Everything is shunyata, empty of inherent existence, dependent on causes and conditions, lacking the kind of permanent, independent, self-sustaining reality that both the materialist and the idealist attribute to their respective foundations. The universe is not independently real against the materialist. Consciousness is not independently real against the idealist. Nothing is independently real. Everything exists in dependence on everything else, in a web of mutual conditioning that has no foundation, no ground, no ultimate basis. This is the most radical response to the Boltzmann brain paradox imaginable. The paradox assumes that there is a difference between real and not real, between a genuine universe produced by genuine physical processes and a Boltzmann brain produced by a random fluctuation. Nagarjuna dissolves the assumption. There is no real in the sense the paradox requires no independent, self-sustaining, foundational reality against which the Boltzmann brain can be measured and found wanting. Everything is empty. Everything is conditioned. Everything is dependent. And the question, are you real, is revealed as misconceived because real, in the absolute, independent, self-sustaining sense that the question requires, does not apply to anything in the universe, whether that universe is 14 billion years old or 1 millisecond old. The Zen tradition addresses the Boltzmann brain scenario through the practice of radical, present moment awareness, the recognition that the only reality is this moment, that the past exists only as memory, which may be false, and the future exists only as anticipation, which may be unfounded. and that the appropriate response to the uncertainty of past and future is the total, unreserved, wholehearted embrace of the present. The Zen master does not worry about whether their memories are real. The Zen master does not worry about whether the universe existed before this moment. The Zen master is here fully, completely, without reservation, in the only moment that is available for direct verification. Now, Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen, describes this with characteristic precision. Do not think that time merely flies away. If time merely flew away, you would be separated from time. The reason you do not clearly understand being time is that you think of time as only passing. Time does not pass in Dogen's framework. Each moment is complete, a total expression of reality, a complete universe, an entire existence arising and passing in a single instant. The Boltzmann brain, if it understood Dogen, would not be troubled by its momentary existence. It would recognize that momentary existence is the only kind of existence there is, that every being, whether produced by 14 billion years of cosmic evolution or by a single quantum fluctuation, exists only in the present moment, only in the now, only in the single, unrepeatable, irreducible instant of being that is the universe's gift to the consciousness that experiences it. The Zen tradition transforms the Boltzmann brain paradox from a threat into a practice. The practice is called shikantaza, just sitting, the objectless meditation in which the practitioner sits, without any technique, without any goal, without any attempt to achieve any state, and simply experiences whatever is occurring in the present moment. Shikantaza is the practice of being a Boltzmann brain on purpose, of inhabiting the single moment of experience without reference to a past, which may be false, without anticipation of a future which may not arrive, and without the construction of a self, which may be a fluctuation. The practitioner does not worry about whether their memories are real. The practitioner does not worry about whether the universe existed before this moment. The practitioner is here fully, completely, without reservation, in the only reality that is available. This moment, this breath, this sound, this sensation. The Zen master Shunryu Suzuki described this practice with the directness that characterizes the Zen tradition. In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. The Boltzmann brain, newly fluctuated, with no genuine history, no established patterns, no accumulated assumptions, is the ultimate beginner. Every moment is fresh. Every experience is new. Every perception is the first perception. The Boltzmann brain paradox, viewed through the Zen lens, is not a catastrophe. It is beginner's mind, the state that every Zen practitioner spends years trying to achieve, the state in which the accumulated weight of history, habit, and assumption is lifted, and the mind perceives reality with the freshness, the clarity, and the wonder of a consciousness that has just come into existence. The Islamic tradition approaches the impermanence of reality through the Asharite doctrine of continuous creation, the theological position that God does not create the universe once and leave it running, but creates it continuously, moment by moment, instant by instant, sustaining every atom in existence at every moment through a continuous act of divine will. The universe is not a machine set in motion by a first cause and left to operate by its own laws. The universe is a continuous act of creation, a moment-by-moment divine decision to sustain the world in existence, a decision that could be withdrawn at any instant, a decision that makes every moment a fresh creation rather than the mechanical continuation of a previous state. The Asharite doctrine is the theological equivalent of the kshana. Each moment is a new creation. Each instant is a fresh act of divine will, and the continuity between moments is not mechanical but intentional. God creates this moment. Then God creates the next moment. The two moments are connected not by physical causation but by divine choice. God chooses to create the next moment in a way that is consistent with the previous moment, producing the appearance of continuity and the illusion of physical law. But the consistency is a choice, not a necessity. God could create the next moment differently. God could create a moment with entirely different physical laws, entirely different contents, entirely different memories. The universe is not governed by law. It is governed by will, and the will is exercised moment by moment, instant by instant, in a continuous creative act that the Ash'arites call occasionalism. Al-Ghazali, the 11th century Islamic philosopher whose Incoherence of the Philosophers is one of the most important works in the history of Islamic thought, used the Ash'arite framework to argue that causation itself is an illusion. Fire does not burn cotton. God burns cotton at the moment when fire touches cotton. God creates the burning, and the appearance of causal connection between the fire and the burning is a divine habit, not a physical necessity. The habit could be broken. God could create a moment in which fire touches cotton and the cotton does not burn. And the human observer, accustomed to the habit, dependent on the appearance of regularity, convinced that fire causes burning, would be shocked, would call it a miracle, would recognize that the causal structure they had taken for granted was never a structure at all, but a pattern of divine choice that could be altered at any moment. Al-Ghazali's insight connects directly to the Boltzmann brain paradox. If causation is a divine habit rather than a physical necessity, then the apparent causal history of the universe, the Big Bang, the formation of galaxies, the evolution of life, the development of your brain is not a causal chain that produced you. It is a divine pattern, a habit of creation that God has chosen to maintain, and that creates the appearance of a causal history. But the habit could be broken, the pattern could be changed. God could create a moment of consciousness with apparent memories of a 14 billion year history without any of that history having actually occurred, because the memories are not caused by the history. Both the memories and the history are caused by God, moment by moment, and the relationship between them is a divine choice rather than a physical necessity. The Islamic concept of qada, divine decree, reinforces this understanding. Everything that occurs is decreed by God, not merely permitted but actively willed, not merely allowed but specifically chosen, not merely foreseen but deliberately created. The universe does not run on autopilot. The universe is driven moment by moment, atom by atom, fluctuation by fluctuation by the continuous creative will of the divine. And the question of whether you are a real person with a real history or a Boltzmann brain with false memories is, in the Islamic framework, a question about God's creative choices, choices that are known only to God and that the human mind cannot penetrate. The Christian tradition engages the impermanence of created reality through the theology of divine sustenance, the doctrine that creation exists only through God's continuous act of holding it in being. The author of the letter to the Hebrews writes that the Son upholds the universe by the word of his power, not upheld, past tense, as though the creating were finished, but upholds, present tense, as though the creating were continuous. Paul writes in Colossians that in him all things hold together. The holding together is an ongoing act, a present tense sustaining, a moment-by-moment decision to maintain the universe in existence that could, in principle, be withdrawn. The mystic Meister Eckhart pushes this to its radical conclusion. God is creating the entire world fully and totally in this present now. Everything God created 6,000 years ago, and even previous to that, when God made the world, God created it all in this present now. Creation is not a past event. Creation is a present act. The universe did not happen. The universe is happening right now, in this moment, through the continuous creative will of the divine ground that sustains every particle, every field, every fluctuation in existence. And the withdrawal of the creative will, the cessation of the sustaining act, would be the dissolution of the universe, the return to the void, the collapse of the fluctuation back into the equilibrium from which it arose. The Aboriginal dream time adds the dimension of narrative creation, the universe sustained, not by divine will or physical law, but by story, by song, by the continuous creative act of dreaming and singing that the ancestral beings perform and that human participants reenact in ceremony. The songlines that cross the Australian landscape are not merely routes or maps. They are creative acts, continuous performances of the songs that called the landscape into being, performances that must be maintained for the landscape to persist. If the songs are forgotten, if the ceremonies are abandoned, if the stories are lost, the landscape itself will dissolve. The creation is not finished. The creation is ongoing. And the creation depends on consciousness, on the creative attention of beings who remember the songs and who sing them into continued existence. The convergence across traditions is remarkable, not merely in the shared recognition that reality is impermanent, constructed, and dependent on a sustaining source, but in the shared response to this recognition. No tradition responds with nihilism. No tradition concludes that impermanence renders existence meaningless. Instead, every tradition concludes that impermanence renders existence precious, that the momentary nature of experience is not a deficiency but a perfection, that the brevity of the fluctuation is not a tragedy but a miracle, and that the appropriate response to the discovery that reality may be a dream, a fluctuation, a momentary arrangement of atoms in the void is not grief but gratitude. Gratitude for the moment, gratitude for the experience. The Kabbalistic concept of the shattering of the vessels, Shevarat HaKelim, describes the cosmic catastrophe in which the vessels that were meant to contain the divine light were shattered by the intensity of the light they received. The shards of the broken vessels, the klipot scattered throughout creation, trapping sparks of divine light within them. The universe, in the Kabbalistic framework, is the debris field of a cosmic shattering, a field of broken fragments, each containing a trapped spark, each waiting to be repaired through the human act of tikkun. The fluctuation, in this framework, is the shattering the moment when the formless divine light attempted to take form and the form could not contain the light. And the experience of being a conscious being in a broken universe, a being who perceives beauty within imperfection, meaning within chaos, divine light within material darkness, is the experience of participating in the repair, the tikkun, the gathering of the sparks that the shattering scattered. The Sufi concept of the breath of the compassionate Nafaz al-Rahman describes creation as God's continuous exhalation, a breath that sustains the universe moment by moment and that gives each being its unique existence through a specific divine articulation. Each being is a letter in the divine speech. Each moment is a syllable in the divine utterance, and the utterance is continuous. God is speaking the universe into existence right now, in this moment, through the breath that sustains every atom and every consciousness in being. Gratitude for the awareness that perceives the fluctuation and that recognizes, in the perceiving, that the awareness itself is not a fluctuation, that the awareness is the ground from which the fluctuations arise, the void in which the Boltzmann brains flash, the equilibrium from which the dreams of Brahma emerge and to which they return. The final part of this investigation will complete the convergence, putting the thermodynamics, the cosmology, the quantum physics, and the traditions together into a single picture. And the picture will address, with the full weight of everything we have assembled, the question that the Boltzmann brain paradox poses with unavoidable directness. Are you real? And if you are, what kind of real are you? 3 investigations. 3 independent approaches to a paradox that emerges from the most basic, most confirmed, most inescapable branch of physics, and that strikes at the foundation of everything you believe about who you are, where you came from, and whether any of it is real. And the convergence between the thermodynamics, the quantum physics, and the traditions produces not the nihilism that the paradox seems to demand, but something far more interesting. A framework in which the question, "Are you real?" is revealed as the wrong question, and the right question transforms everything. The thermodynamics establish the paradox. Entropy always increases. The universe is running down. The extraordinarily low entropy of the Big Bang, quantified by Penrose as 1 chance in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123, is not explained by any known law of physics. Boltzmann proposed that our ordered universe is a fluctuation from thermal equilibrium, a temporary, random, statistically inevitable departure from the featureless void. But Boltzmann's own statistical logic demands that the smallest possible fluctuation consistent with your current experience is exponentially more probable than the fluctuation that produced an entire universe. And the smallest possible fluctuation is a Boltzmann brain, a momentary arrangement of matter equipped with false memories, false perceptions, and the false conviction that it is a real person in a real universe. The cosmology established the stakes. The universe's future dominated by dark energy, accelerating expansion, and the eventual heat death provides the conditions for Boltzmann brain production on an infinite scale. After the last star burns out, after the last black hole evaporates, the infinite dark era stretches ahead, an eternity of near equilibrium punctuated by random fluctuations, each one producing a momentary flash of experience, each one vastly more probable than the 14 billion year cosmic process that you believe produced you. The ratio of Boltzmann brain moments to real observer moments is infinite to finite. If you are a randomly selected moment of consciousness, you are almost certainly a Boltzmann brain. The quantum physics established the mechanism. The quantum vacuum fluctuates, producing virtual particles, generating the Casimir force, sustaining the zero-point energy that pervades all of space-time. These fluctuations can, in principle, produce macroscopic structures including, given infinite time, structures complex enough to support a single moment of conscious experience. And the filter theory adds a radical possibility. The fluctuation may not need to create consciousness. It may only need to filter it, providing a momentary, physical, thermodynamically improbable constraint on the pre-existing consciousness that pervades the vacuum, shaping universal awareness into a specific, individual, apparently personal experience for a single, fleeting instant. The traditions establish the response. Hinduism described the universe as Maya, cosmic illusion, Brahma's dream, a fluctuation from the formless ground of Brahman. Buddhism described experience as a stream of kshanas, momentary instants, arising and passing in rapid succession, each one a complete universe, none of them persisting, all of them empty of independent existence. Islam described creation as continuous, sustained moment by divine will, dependent on God's ongoing creative choice, dissolving the moment the choice is withdrawn. Christianity described the universe as held in being by the continuous act of divine sustenance. And every tradition, without exception, responded to the impermanence of created reality not with nihilism, but with a redirection of attention, from the impermanent to the permanent, from the fluctuation to the ground, from the dream to the dreamer, from the construction to the awareness that perceives the construction. Now let us confront the objections. The first objection is the self-refuting objection. The Boltzmann brain argument uses physics to conclude that physics might be false. If you are a Boltzmann brain, then the thermodynamics and statistical mechanics that led you to the Boltzmann brain conclusion are false memories, products of a fluctuation, not products of genuine scientific investigation conducted over centuries by real scientists in a real universe. The argument undermines its own premises. The conclusion invalidates the reasoning that produced it. And a conclusion that invalidates its own reasoning is not a conclusion, it is a paradox, a logical trap, a self-consuming snake that devours its own tail and vanishes. This objection has genuine force. The self-refuting character of the Boltzmann brain argument is real, and it is one of the reasons that many physicists treat the argument as a reductio ad absurdum rather than a genuine threat. If a cosmological model predicts that you are probably a Boltzmann brain, then the model predicts that its own evidential basis is probably false, which means the model is self-undermining and should be rejected in favor of a model that does not have this property. But the self-refuting objection does not eliminate the problem. It relocates it. The problem is no longer, you might be a Boltzmann brain. The problem is, any cosmological model that produces an infinite future populated by Boltzmann brains is self-undermining, and the standard cosmological model, with its dark energy and its accelerating expansion and its infinite dark era, appears to be exactly such a model. The Boltzmann brain problem is not a problem about your identity. It is a problem about cosmology, a constraint on what the correct model of the universe can look like. The correct model must somehow avoid Boltzmann brain dominance, and the fact that we do not yet have a universally accepted model that avoids it is one of the deepest unsolved problems in modern physics. The second objection is the irrelevance objection. Even if Boltzmann brains are theoretically possible, they are practically irrelevant. The probability of a Boltzmann brain fluctuating into existence at any given moment is so astronomically small, so far below any threshold of practical concern, that worrying about it is like worrying about the sun, spontaneously converting into a ham sandwich, possible in principle, impossible in practice, and not worth losing sleep over. This objection is pragmatically valid, but philosophically insufficient. The Boltzmann brain problem is not about what will happen to you. It is about what you are about, the nature of your existence, the reliability of your memories, the status of your past, and the meaning of your experience. The probability of you being a Boltzmann brain right now may be astronomically small, but the probability is not zero, and the mere possibility, the logical, physical, mathematically well-defined possibility that your entire experience is a momentary fluctuation with no real history, raises questions about the nature of reality that cannot be dismissed by invoking the smallness of the Corman probability. The traditions understood this. The Buddhist doctrine of impermanence does not say that your cup of coffee will spontaneously disintegrate in the next millisecond. It says that the impermanence of all conditioned phenomena, the fact that everything arises and passes, that nothing persists, that continuity is an illusion, is a truth about the nature of reality that transforms how you relate to experience, regardless of the timescale on which the impermanence operates. The Boltzmann brain problem operates on the same level. It is not a practical warning about imminent dissolution, but a philosophical revelation about the nature of existence. And the revelation, like all genuine revelations, demands a response. The third objection is the multiverse objection. Perhaps the Boltzmann brain problem is an artifact of the wrong cosmological model. Perhaps the universe is not headed for an infinite dark era populated by random fluctuations. Perhaps the universe is part of a multiverse, an ensemble of universes with different physical constants, different initial conditions, and different futures. In some multiverse models, particularly those based on the string theory landscape, the number of real observers across all the universes is infinite, and the ratio of real observers to Boltzmann brains is no longer problematic. This objection may be correct, but it trades one unverifiable hypothesis. You might be a Boltzmann brain for another. You live in a multiverse. The multiverse has not been observed. It cannot be observed. By definition, other universes are causally disconnected from ours. And the invocation of the multiverse to solve the Boltzmann brain problem is, in the view of some physicists, an example of solving an unobservable problem with an unobservable solution, a move that, while logically coherent, does not advance our empirical understanding of reality. Now let us trace the connections. The observer effect is the quantum foundation of the Boltzmann brain paradox. The observer collapses the wave function, but the observer might be a Boltzmann brain. If the observer is a Boltzmann brain, a momentary fluctuation with false memories and false perceptions, then the reality that the observer collapses into existence is itself contingent on a fluctuation. Reality is observer-dependent. The observer is fluctuation-dependent, and reality is therefore fluctuation-dependent. A house of cards built on a foundation of statistical chance, held together not by physical law, but by the momentary coherence of a consciousness that might dissolve at any instant. The heart investigation revealed that the body processes information through its electromagnetic field, but if the body is a Boltzmann fluctuation, then the heart's information processing is a momentary artifact, a brief, structured, electromagnetically coherent pattern that appeared from the void and that will return to the void, and yet the coherence is real while it lasts. The love the heart processes is genuine while it is felt. The connection the heart broadcasts is authentic while it persists. The Boltzmann brain paradox does not diminish the reality of the moment. It intensifies it by revealing that the moment is all there is, that the moment is not guaranteed by a past or secured by a future, that the moment is a gift whose preciousness is proportional to its fragility. The placebo investigation demonstrated that belief creates biology. The Boltzmann brain paradox asks, but what creates belief? If your beliefs are the product of a random fluctuation, if the neural configurations that constitute your convictions, your values, your sense of meaning were assembled by chance from the thermal void, then the beliefs that create your biology are themselves contingent, accidental, unsupported by the history that you believe produced them. And yet the biology they create is real. The placebo effect works regardless of the origin of the belief. The meaning you find in life produces measurable biological effects regardless of whether the life is real in the cosmological sense. The Boltzmann brain's experience is genuine experience, however brief, however contingent, however unsupported by a real past. The fear investigation demonstrated that chronic fear accelerates aging and degrades cardiac coherence. The Boltzmann brain paradox produces a unique form of fear, the existential vertigo of discovering that your entire history might be fabricated, that your memories might be false, that the ground beneath your feet might be a statistical fluctuation. But the tradition's response to this fear is consistent with their response to every other form of fear. The fear is about the self. The fear of being a Boltzmann brain is the fear of the self's contingency, the terror of discovering that the I has no secure foundation, no guaranteed continuity, no reliable past. And the cure for this fear is the same cure that every tradition prescribes: the recognition that the self was never the foundation. The awareness was the foundation. And the awareness, if the filter theory is correct, if consciousness is fundamental rather than derivative, does not depend on the self's history, the self's continuity, or the self's reality. The awareness is present in the Boltzmann brain's momentary flash just as fully as it is present in the biologically evolved brain's decades of experience. The moment of consciousness is complete regardless of its cause, regardless of its duration, regardless of its history. The subconscious investigation revealed that 95% of cognitive processing occurs below conscious awareness. The Boltzmann brain paradox asks, processing of what? If the inputs are fabricated, if the sensory data that the unconscious processes is the product of a random fluctuation rather than a real environment, then the unconscious is processing fiction. But the processing is still real. The patterns the unconscious detects are still patterns. The insights the unconscious produces are still insights. And the creativity that emerges from the unconscious processing, the ideas that arrive unbidden from the default mode network, are still creative, still novel, still meaningful, regardless of whether the network that produced them has a 14 billion year causal history or a 1 millisecond fluctuation history. The information investigation established that reality is made of information rather than matter. The Boltzmann brain paradox, reframed in informational terms, asks, is the information in your brain real information, the product of genuine informational processes occurring across cosmic time, or is it random information, a momentary, accidental, structureless arrangement that happens by pure chance to encode the appearance of meaning, the illusion of history, and the experience of being a person in a universe? The distinction between real information and random but structured information is the deepest question the paradox poses, and the quantum physics suggests that the distinction may be less clear than it appears. If information is conserved, if the unitarity of quantum mechanics guarantees that no information is destroyed, then the information in a Boltzmann brain is not random in the sense of being meaningless. It is information real, conserved, physically present information that happens to be organized into a pattern that produces a moment of conscious experience. The organization is improbable, but the information is real, and the experience that the information produces is real as any experience produced by any arrangement of information. However that arrangement was achieved, the karma investigation demonstrated that intentional actions leave traces that persist in the neural pathways, the somatic markers, the epigenome, and the quantum field. The Boltzmann brain paradox asks, but are the traces real? If your karmic history is a fabrication, if the intentions that you believe shaped your character were never actually intended, if the actions that you believe deposited traces were never actually performed, then the karma you carry is fictional karma, the product of a random arrangement rather than a causal history. And yet the traces are present, the patterns are real, the tendencies are functional. A Boltzmann brain equipped with the neural patterns of a compassionate person will experience compassion regardless of whether those patterns were deposited by genuine compassionate actions or by a random fluctuation that happened to produce the same configuration. The karma is real as pattern, even if it is fictional as history. And the Buddhist tradition, with its emphasis on the present moment's intention rather than the past's causal chain, is uniquely equipped to handle this distinction. What matters is not where the pattern came from. What matters is what the pattern does now. The lucid dreaming investigation revealed that consciousness can be aware within a reality it recognizes as a construction. The Boltzmann brain paradox is the cosmological version of the lucid dream. the recognition that the reality you inhabit may be a construction, a projection, a momentary arrangement that consciousness takes to be real, because consciousness has no access to any reality beyond its own experience. The lucid dreamer's response is not to collapse in despair. The lucid dreamer's response is to investigate, to explore the dream, to test its boundaries, to discover what is real within the dream and what dissolves when examined closely. The same response applies to the Boltzmann brain scenario. If you might be a Boltzmann brain, if your reality might be a construction, then the appropriate response is not despair, but investigation. What is real within the construction? What persists when the construction is examined? What remains when the false memories are recognized as possibly false? When the false history is recognized as possibly fabricated? When every external reference point is recognized as possibly contingent? The answer from the neuroscience, from the quantum physics, from every contemplative tradition is the same. Awareness remains. Consciousness remains. The perceiving, the direct, immediate first-person experiencing that is occurring right now remains. Everything else can be doubted. The awareness that doubts cannot be doubted because the doubting is itself an act of awareness, and the awareness of the doubting confirms the awareness even as it questions everything else. The OBE investigation demonstrated that consciousness can experience itself as located outside the body. The Boltzmann brain may have no body, or its body may be so minimal, so transient, so far from anything resembling a human form, that the concept of body does not apply. And yet, if consciousness is present, if awareness is occurring, then the OBE finding suggests that the absence of a body does not entail the absence of consciousness. The Boltzmann brain's consciousness may not be in a body, it may not be in a universe, it may not be anywhere in any spatial sense that the word anywhere implies. It may simply be a moment of pure awareness, unsupported by body, unsupported by universe, unsupported by history, existing for a single instant in the void and experiencing, in that instant, the totality of what it means to be aware. The aging investigation revealed that aging is information loss. The Boltzmann brain paradox reveals that the Boltzmann brain does not age because aging requires a past, and the Boltzmann brain has no past. The Boltzmann brain is eternally young, a single moment of experience, unweathered by time, unscratched by the epigenetic degradation that Sinclair documented, unscarred by the senescent cell accumulation that Kirkland targeted. The Boltzmann brain is born and dies in the same instant, and in that instant, it is ageless, timeless, and complete. The traditions describe the awareness beyond the self in exactly these terms, as ageless, as timeless, as complete in every moment. The Boltzmann brain, paradoxically, may be closer to the contemplative ideal than the biologically evolved brain, because it has no past to cling to, no future to fear, and no accumulated self to defend. Every thread connects. Every investigation enriches the paradox. And the enrichment produces not despair, but a deepening, a progressive recognition that the question, "Are you real?" is asking the wrong thing. The right question is not, "Are you real?" The right question is, "What is real about you?" And the answer from the physics and the traditions alike is the awareness, not the memories, not the history, not the causal chain that you believe produced you. The awareness, the consciousness that is present in this moment, whether this moment is the product of 14 billion years of cosmic evolution or a single quantum fluctuation in the void. The awareness that is reading these words right now. The awareness that is noticing the thoughts that these words produce. The awareness that would be present fully, completely, without diminishment, even if everything else about your experience were revealed to be a fabrication. The Boltzmann brain paradox is the ultimate test of what you identify with. If you identify with your history, with your past, your memories, your causal chain, then the paradox is devastating. Your history might be false, your memories might be fabricated, your causal chain might be an illusion, and the self that you built on that foundation collapses. But if you identify with the awareness, with the consciousness that is present, regardless of history, regardless of causation, regardless of whether the universe is real or dreamed or fluctuated, then the paradox is irrelevant. The awareness is present. The awareness is real. The awareness is here right now, in this moment, complete and undeniable, regardless of how it got here, regardless of how long it will last, regardless of whether the past that seems to stretch behind it is genuine or fabricated. Boltzmann died in 1906, believing he had failed. His equation, S equals K log W, was carved on his tombstone as a memorial to a theory that his contemporaries rejected. He did not live to see the vindication of his statistical mechanics. He did not live to see the discovery of the cosmic microwave background that confirmed the low entropy of the Big Bang. He did not live to see the accelerating expansion. He did not live to see 3 Nobel Prizes awarded for discoveries: Blackburn's telomeres, Osumi's autophagy, Perlmutter's dark energy, that connect directly to the questions his work raised. He did not live to see the accelerating expansion that guaranteed the infinite future in which his fluctuation hypothesis would produce its most disturbing consequence. But the paradox that bears his name is not a failure. It is a gift from the deepest logic of thermodynamics to anyone willing to receive it. The gift is this: the universe is temporary, the structures are temporary, the self is temporary, the memories are temporary, everything that you cling to, everything that the ego identifies as mine, everything that the narrative self claims as its history, everything that the DMN generates as the continuous story of me, is contingent, uncertain, and possibly fabricated. The music investigation revealed that specific frequencies produce specific states of consciousness, and that the physics of entrainment can synchronize brains, hearts, and electromagnetic fields across individuals. The Boltzmann brain, if it fluctuated into existence with the neural patterns of a musician, would hear music, not real music, produced by real instruments in a real concert hall, but the internal music of a brain configured to process and generate musical experience, and the music would be beautiful. The beauty would be real as any beauty produced by any brain, however that brain was assembled, because beauty is not a property of the causal history. Beauty is a property of the pattern, and the pattern, the specific arrangement of neural activity that produces the experience of musical beauty, is equally beautiful. Whether it was assembled by 4 billion years of biological evolution or by a single quantum fluctuation in the void, the synchronicity investigation revealed that meaningful coincidences are causal correlations between inner states and outer events, challenge the conventional understanding of causation. The Boltzmann brain paradox challenges causation even more fundamentally because the Boltzmann brain has no causal history at all. If synchronicity is the perception of meaning in the absence of causation, then the Boltzmann brain's entire existence is synchronistic, a meaningful experience arising without any causal basis, a moment of consciousness appearing without any reason, a flash of awareness existing without any history. The Boltzmann brain is the ultimate synchronicity, a meaningful event with no cause, a significant experience with no explanation, a moment of awareness arising from nothing and returning to nothing, and being, for the instant of its existence, absolutely real. The distance and time investigations revealed that spatial and temporal boundaries may be informational constructions rather than fundamental features of reality. If space emerges from entanglement and time emerges from information processing, then the Boltzmann brain, which exists at a single point for a single instant, may not be as impoverished as it appears. In a single point, all of space is implicitly present because space is emergent and the information from which it emerges is non-local. In a single instant, all of time is implicitly present because time is emergent and the information from which it emerges is atemporal. The Boltzmann brain, existing for a single instant at a single point, may implicitly contain all of space and all of time, not as memories of a past or perceptions of an environment, but as the informational structure from which space and time emerge. The brain is a point, but the point contains the universe. This is the holographic principle applied to the Boltzmann brain, and it transforms the brain from an impoverished fragment into a compressed totality, a single pixel that contains the entire image, a single note that contains the entire symphony. The creativity investigation revealed that the most profound creative insights arrive from beyond the individual mind, from the implicate order, from the quantum vacuum, from the collective unconscious. The Boltzmann brain paradox adds a layer. If the individual mind is a fluctuation, then the creative insights it receives are interactions between two levels of reality: the momentary, fluctuating, constructed level of the individual mind and the permanent, non-fluctuating, unconstructed level of the implicate order. The Boltzmann brain that receives a creative insight is a moment of contact between the temporary and the eternal, a flash of awareness in which the impermanent construction touches the permanent ground and perceives, however briefly, the informational structure that underlies all constructions. The insight is real, even if the brain is a fluctuation. The beauty is real, even if the universe is a dream. The meaning is real, even if the history is fabricated. This is the tradition's deepest insight, and it is the answer to the existential vertigo that the Boltzmann brain paradox produces. The vertigo comes from identifying with the construction. If you are the construction, if you are the history, the memories, the causal chain, then the possibility that the construction is a fluctuation is terrifying. Everything you are might be false. But if you are the awareness, if you are the consciousness that perceives the construction, that experiences the history, whether or not the history is real, that is present in the moment, regardless of the moment's origin, then the possibility that the construction is a fluctuation is not terrifying. It is clarifying. It clarifies what is essential and what is contingent. It clarifies what persists and what passes. It clarifies what you can rely on, not the memories, not the history, not the causal chain, but the awareness itself, the consciousness itself, the being itself that is present in every moment, in every construction, in every fluctuation, as the one reality that does not depend on anything else for its existence. But the awareness is not temporary. The awareness is not contingent. The awareness is not possibly fabricated, because the fabrication, if it exists within the awareness, not the other way around. The dream occurs within the dreamer, not the dreamer within the dream. The fluctuation occurs within the void, not the void within the fluctuation. And the moment of experience, however brief, however accidental, however thermodynamically improbable, occurs within the consciousness that the traditions have been describing for 4,000 years as the only reality that does not fluctuate. You may be a Boltzmann brain. Your memories may be false. Your universe may be a dream. Your past may be a fabrication. But the awareness that is reading this sentence is not false. The consciousness that is present in this moment is not a fabrication. And the recognition, the direct, immediate, undeniable recognition that awareness is present right now, regardless of everything else, is not a fluctuation. It is the ground from which all fluctuations arise. The identity investigation, the investigation we completed just before this one, established that you are not your thoughts, not your narrative, not the DMN-generated story of me. You are the awareness in which the story appears. The Boltzmann brain paradox extends this insight to its cosmological limit. You are not your history. You are not your causal chain. You are not the 14 billion years that you believe produced you. You are the awareness that would be equally present, equally real, equally undeniable, whether it was produced by cosmic evolution or by a quantum hiccup in the void. The identity investigation asked, who are you in the silence between your thoughts? The Boltzmann brain investigation asks, who are you in the void between the fluctuations? And the answer is the same. The awareness, the consciousness, the ground. The traditions converge on this answer with a unanimity that spans every culture and every century. Brahman does not fluctuate. Buddha nature does not arise and pass. The Gottheit does not depend on the universe for its existence. Al-Haq does not require a causal history. The Tao does not emerge from the void. The Tao is the void, and the 10,000 things that arise from it are its temporary, impermanent, precious, beautiful, transient expressions. You are not the expression. You are the ground from which the expression arises, and the ground does not fluctuate. And it is what you are.